Ark Beyond Ascension, Part 14. Hello everyone and welcome back to our journey. So we go through and start our journey off today by getting attacked in our base. This Dillo thought that it was okay to come on in and attack our Oviraptor. And this Oviraptor is our absolute best friend because he's making breeding an absolute breeze. So yeah, we took that personal and ended his life. I then decided it'd probably be smart to go through and give our base just a little bit more protection. I should have built dino gates, but I was honestly feeling a little bit lazy, and I already had these traps on hand, so I just went through and placed a couple of traps down. Just in case a Dillo or a Raptor tried to head this way, it should hopefully deter them enough to not come on over. I then went through and took our Inky out back to the mountain because I was in dire need of metal. Obviously, I've got a bunch from the last trip, but I really want the Industrial Forge and the Industrial Cooker because cooking one kibble at a time is just a royal pain. Especially because you just can't load up all of the water, and then just having the Industrial Forge, of course, will make ammunition and pretty much all metal needs in the future significantly easier. I then decided that on the way back to the base, I'd go through and take the long route back because I wanted to go through and scope out some tames and hopefully find something decent. So I figured I'd go through the snow looking for Megatheriums, mammoths, or direwolves, or possibly even a Tyrannus. That way I could go through and start getting all the essential items for the boss fights, as well as for the actual caves as well. But yeah, there was not a whole bunch that I could find. Everything here is pretty low level. I then went through and found a small little platform in the back of the snow area with some obsidian. I actually found a penguin on it as well. And I knew polymer was going to go through and be an issue in the future, so I was deciding on whether or not I could actually tame this. I haven't tamed a penguin in a very long time, so I went through and I tried to use my bow to tame it, and I was actually surprised. I was able to go through and knock it out. I say I was surprised because typically when you use a crossbow, more often than not on low health creatures, you tend to kill them. That's usually when you'd want to go through and swap over to the actual gun, like the sniper rifle versus the actual crossbow. But surprisingly, that guy knocked out. I'm assuming he had quite a bit more health than standard ones. I then thought this was another one to try to knock it out. I forget that, you know, just because something's smaller, usually you'd associate that with babies, but there are baby wild penguins, and you can usually just knock out penguins. But yeah, I shot it thinking I could tame it. In reality, I could not, which is why the parent attacked me, so I went through and I killed him as well. And then almost immediately after killing that penguin and harvesting up some corpses, Ark knew things were going well for me, so he sent over a whole bunch of bad stuff. A wild pack of Daedons had found us and proceeded to go through and attack us. It hit our Inky as well, and then a mammoth was also going through and dealing with them. So I knew this was probably not looking good for our tame here, because this was just a giant battlefield in the snow. It was always a hard place to go through and tame stuff. But surprisingly, I managed to go through and kill everything without too much effort. And on top of that, we didn't lose any taming effectiveness whatsoever on the penguin. Don't ask me how, but we didn't. And he ended up getting hungry really fast. I went through and I fed him some prime meat. He tamed up almost immediately, so I threw him in a cryopod, and then we proceeded to go through and make our way home. Just kidding. I got distracted and I found another little ice shelf that had some penguins on it, thinking I could go through and tame these guys too, but I had no such luck. I must have got significantly lucky the first time, and that guy must just be an absolute beefcake for like having a bunch of health, because basically everything else that I shot with my crossbow basically died in one, if not two hits, and they did not go through and get knocked out whatsoever. So getting a second penguin friend and going through and starting up that organic polymer farm is gonna have to wait for now. So far, I've pretty much just been allowing Ark to go through and do its thing when it comes to basically creating new spawns for creatures, especially in the area for like the snow biome, because basically everything kills everything, and eventually everything just respawns and gets new spawns. But I was really struggling to find mammoths, so basically any mammoth or Megatherium that I went through and found on my way home, I proceeded to go through and kill, hoping they would generate some new spawns for potential high tames in the future. I then got back to the house and went through and placed my penguin in the cryo fridge and unloaded all of the metal from the Inky because I wanted this to go through and continue smelting pretty much the entire time, because I knew this was going to take absolutely forever, and the sooner I can get this Industrial Forge, the better. At this point too, a lot of my jerky had gone through and finished cooking, so I figured that would be a great time to go through and start breeding again on my RGs, because that way I was going to spend some time cooking the kibble, tending to the different crops that I had as well, while I go through and make all of the kibble throughout the course of the night. I quickly realized, though, with the speed at which I was actually breeding, that I needed a place to go through and store my eggs, so I went through and crafted a second fridge. Granted, the eggs probably would not have gone through and expired, but I figured it'd be a great place to go through and keep them. In the event that I would use them to go through and craft some additional kibble, I would have a big supply, and I'd not have to worry about where they were located, because it would all be located in one place. I then crafted up a second AC as well, because one AC was not cutting it, and there was periods of the day where the eggs would actually not go through and hatch with just the one, so two worked. And now that the sun had come back out, it was time to begin exploring yet again. So I returned to the snow biome, and I did go through and find myself a red drop, so I went and checked that out because I'm always down for loot, and I get easily distracted. Definitely gonna throw that out there because you've seen me grab all the loot drops pretty much all the time. they basically always take priority for me. But the great thing is they tend to have pretty decent stuff, so I would say a good amount of time it's worth it. Then we went through and said hi to our carchar buddy, who's been up here basically since way earlier. He just hasn't left the area yet. So at one point in time, I'll probably come back and try and kill him. I'm not sure when, but I definitely want to go through and try to trigger some higher level spawns when possible. I then swooped down to the forest floor in the snow biome here, trying to go through and find some high level spawns. Again, scoping out all of the mammoths, Megatheriums, and the wolves. And this RG was trying to get a taste of me, but yeah, I just didn't have time to fight him. I didn't care. So I continued my search, and this was actually a great place. What's really extremely weird, like bonkers, I don't understand it. I have not seen a single Utyrannus since like the 4th day living up in this area. All up and down the snow biome in the beginning when I was using Blueberry, they were here all the time killing absolutely everything. And in every playthrough that I do, they are here killing absolutely everything. I have not seen a single one for like 10 in-game days. So it's kind of concerning because I already struggle to find a high-level one in general. But yeah, I can't seem to find them. Maybe there's just too many mammoths and they're taking them out, but I can't find one. So we'll definitely have to keep an eye out for that too. I then kind of left the snow biome just for a little bit, and I discovered an alpha Carno, so we went through and took him out. I won't have you go through and watch the entire fight because he didn't have any buddies, so it was a pretty straightforward fight. Just basically fly above him and go through and dig my talons into him, and he can't do all that much, especially when he has no friends. So I killed him without any issue, and then I went through and I scored some loot. But the loot itself was not all that great, I'll be honest. It was not worth it. I then went through and found a pack of 3 aloes, and none of them were great levels, and I figured I should go through and kill them, as I've actually only discovered 1 aloe so far in the playthrough, and I knew I was going to be needing the aloe brains for the tributes here, and I hate having to go through and just like farm a whole bunch of tributes all at once. I like to do it progressively throughout the course of the game. It just makes it seem more streamlined and not as grindy. So I went through and I killed these guys and I picked up all their brains. I then returned to the snow biome, or the forested part of the snow biome, basically where the mountainous area meets the snow, to continue the search, looking for some high level creatures. And the first Megatherium I spotted was not all that great, but then I noticed a mammoth here off to my right. So I figured I'd go through and scope him out, because if he was a decent level, I was going to save him from the RG, but of course he was not. And if he was a high level, he probably would not have been losing in the first place. But then, there in the distance, I spotted a level 145 Megatherium with a child. The perfect find. So I had to go through and basically get a trap set up so I could actually start taming these guys. So with the trap all set up, with the pieces that I actually brought back from my base that were all metal, I went through and I fired off at the Megatherium, and I lured him over to the trap, hoping he can go through and basically just walk into the trap here, and I would go through and get him stuck. But apparently he did not fit here in this little 2x2, at least not with me in it, because when he basically went down on all fours, he was massive. It absolutely did not work, so he proceeded to go through and pummel me. So I needed a new plan. So at this point, I actually didn't have any more metal left, but I went through and I farmed up some different resources and basically extended it by 2 using some wooden foundations or wooden ceilings, and I did manage to go through and get him in here, but basically every time he whacked me, it completely threw off my aim, and I am terrible at placing structures when I'm on RG in general, and then when I'm getting smacked in the face, yeah, it does not help whatsoever. So I could not go through and get it on, but just at the last minute, right before he walked out, I managed to actually get one placed down, and I thought potentially he was stuck, but then Ark said, nope, think again, because he went through and he basically learned to dance and slowly slid out. Again, back to the drawing board. I then went through and designed a ramp for the trap, figuring that if he wouldn't go through and fall in the trap, at least if he could hit me and possibly basically just knock himself into the trap through using myself as bait, then we would have no issues whatsoever. That was going to be the way we could actually get him in the trap, as using ourselves as bait. And that was the hope, that I basically would be able to go through and trick the AI, so we didn't think it was actually walking directly into a pitfall trap, but because it was going to be attacking me, it would go through and work. Yeah, but it didn't. No, he was too smart, and he was far too big, and he is extremely, extremely fast. They are very fast for their size. So I figured, okay, well, worst case scenario, I'm going to put myself in the trap so you can't get to me. And then the dummy came in here. He basically ran in here just to come get at me because I felt safe. But he was in the trap, so I couldn't really complain, and I was super happy. That means he had nowhere that he could go, and he certainly did not seem like he could get out this time. So I was actually able to go through and knock him out without too many issues. Just down he went. That was it. So the hardest part was over. And then he had a baby, and I decided what I wanted to do with the baby. I was really hoping that if I tamed the parent, that if I was able to go through and tame the baby afterwards, that I would basically get the taming levels. I honestly don't know how that works. I don't know if you ever get taming levels with babies. I honestly don't know. But yeah, I dropped him in the trap so he was safe. And then I spotted a level 135 Megatherium. It was like really my lucky day. 2 high levels literally right next to each other. The only problem is I had literally no traps left, and trying to get this one in the trap was just an absolute pain. So I had to come up with a new idea, and essentially what I did is I took the wooden spikes that I'd already had on me. I basically carry these essentially everywhere I go. Whenever I'm taming, just to basically go through and protect my tames, because usually the worst thing that could happen in a single-player world is the wild creatures go through and mess with your tames, and so this tends to deter the majority of them. And so I went through and I placed these down just to keep this guy safe. I then went through and started harvesting some more resources and figured we would try a different kind of trap with this next Megatherium. I figured we'd go through and try dinosaur gates because they're actually a lot taller and he might just simply walk into them if I could just close the gate on his face. Even if it's wooden, my crossbow is so powerful that I should be able to knock out before he could ever break the gates down. So that's what we went through and tried to do, is build up a bunch of gates. But then as I was harvesting some materials, I wasn't paying attention. He actually walked up and got in my face, and I accidentally smacked him with my axe. So thankfully I was able to go through and get him my RG. Things were getting a bit scary, and he deals a whole bunch of damage. This guy actually dealt even more damage than what the level 145 did, so I was kind of scared. But I basically went through and I flew off until he left me alone, and then I proceeded to go through and come back, and I finished up my trap. But as soon as I finished up my trap, I went through and I placed the last piece, and I noticed there was an RG that was super close by, and I did not want him to basically go through and interfere with the taming process. So I proceeded to go through and kill him just to be safe, as this was the only predator I saw in sight, and I did not want him to go through and basically attract corpses, or basically attract things to corpses. So yeah, I had to go through and kill him. Sorry, dude, you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And then I decided I was going to try and be Captain America or something. I don't know. I proceeded to go through and think that it would be a good idea to try this on foot. So I basically shot at him and I parachuted down, knowing how fast he was, thinking I could beat him all the way down here. But yeah, he smacked me out of the sky. Thankfully, he sent me flying closer to my RG. And then my RG came over and basically I could go through and hop on him. The goal was I would get down to the little gates here, and I'd be able to go through and close the gate basically behind me, and he would be stuck in there because I didn't actually build enough space for the RG to get through the side of the gates. That wasn't going to work, but yeah, it did not work. It was an epic fail on every proportion. And then I noticed there was an RG getting close to my other tame, which was basically a big concern because it was the only creature who could actually basically walk straight past the wooden spikes. And I didn't want to go through and risk that. I also didn't want to leave his corpse there just in the case that it basically drew other predators nearby. So I went through and I ate that up, and I then made my way back over, and the guy was actually kind of dumb. He was just attacking my wooden gates and not me, so it allowed me to go through and basically fire a bunch of arrows into him without doing too much. I don't know why I didn't just sit here to go through and continue firing arrows, since he was just sitting still and not moving. I then proceeded to go through and open up the door, and in that basically happening, he smacked me in the face, and the moment he hit me, he was aggroed onto me instead of the gates. So I guess that's me just being impatient or nosy. I should have just left him as was. I tried to get him to go through and follow me into the gates, but he literally had zero interest in coming in here. There was no way I could convince him to come in here. We kept running in circles and running around, and he refused to go into the dinosaur gates. So I don't know if you can only use like one dinosaur gate and then put a bear trap and then it's fine. But if you make a long corridor, they do not seem to come in. They know that something is fishy. But eventually I was able to go through and basically get him aggroed back onto the gates. So this gave me a prime opportunity to go through and pelt him with arrows. And then he started torpor running. And like I mentioned, the most difficult struggle about this earlier is the fact that this guy is insanely fast. There were so many times I would line up a shot, and then he would just do like this insane, like random, like basically break your ankles basketball kind of moment where I thought I had him, and then he basically would twist and turn and run in circles. And he kept coming back, like he just stayed in this area, so that was nice. But yeah, he was very difficult to go through and catch. And then we got attacked by a Daedon and by a direwolf. Thankfully, I was able to go through and bolo the direwolf. And then I sicked my RG on him because I didn't want to get any closer with that Daedon because he was going to be significantly more difficult to kill. And the wolf actually fell down pretty quick. I didn't even need to help. I thought I was going to have to. But yeah, we were just fine. And then I basically told my RG to chill out so I could go through and ride him. And then once I got on him, we went through and started working towards the Daedon, because the Daedon was going to cause an issue if he ended up hitting our Megatherium once he was down. And I did not want this, and he was getting awfully close to it. I don't know, I think it's at 262, so I think I did go through and hit him on accident, but the fact that he wasn't knocked out yet was okay. And then eventually, after running around just a little bit longer, he finally ended up falling down. So once he went through and fell down, I wanted to go through and protect this guy as well, but I didn't know if the spike traps would be a good idea. So I figured what we could actually do is we already had gone through and built all the dinosaur gates. So I went through and repaired all of the dinosaur gates, and then I brought them down here, and I basically just placed 6 of them in a giant rectangular box. and I basically just enclosed him in here. And I went through and I did have to build a couple of doors, but then during the process of building the doors, we got attacked by a saber. Thankfully, he went for my RG and not for me because I was already hungry. And as you can see, I actually no longer have any food, so I'd actually been freezing off and on because one of them broke my chest piece earlier. So I had to go through and craft a hide chest piece because my fur one had been broken by the first Megatherium. And then I've completely ran out of food too, so I've been surviving off of berries for the last couple of minutes. So I was really hoping to just get this trap in place. And then once it was in place and I felt like everything was good, I proceeded to go through and make my way back to the base. So I could go through and pick up my kibble and hopefully kill some time by doing some chores while they go through and wait to get fed. Then once all my chores were done and I had my kibble in hand, we set back on off to go through and feed these guys. Then once I had gone through and arrived back, I loved this peaceful little area. Honestly, the fact that there is still just a deer walking around and a mammoth meant that things are pretty good and there's nothing bad, because those things would definitely either be dead or in a fight had there been anything that was dangerous nearby. And then I went through and I stuck the kibble in. I was honestly expecting to take significantly more, even with just the 1.5 rates, but apparently kibble is just that great compared to the crops, and he tamed up very, very fast. Now, I did go through and tame up the baby too, and then I basically put the parent in the cryopod. I then proceeded to go through and pick up all of my traps and my structures so I could reuse those at a later point in time. And then I decided I actually did not want the baby since it didn't receive the taming levels. So we were going to go through and leave it here. This is basically going to be the Megatherium's version of a Bambi, except she could just know that her mom wasn't dead. She was just put to sleep, taken by some random straver, going to be forced into slavery, and potentially be killed in a fight to go through and kill a giant spider. So there was at least somewhat positive hopes, but yeah, so we left the baby there, and then we went through and grabbed the second one here and tamed them up and threw them in a cryopod. I then went through and picked up the last of these structures as well, and then made my way home, and then I realized that I did not have the Megatherium settle learned yet, so I went through and I learned it, and then I found that I actually did not have all of the materials I needed to actually go through and build it. So I headed on over to the oasis to go through and pick up some cementing paste and some wood. And then I realized that I was about to get attacked by a beaver, so I went through and I dropped the wood to basically go through and get out of here. And basically I just went through and lured the beaver away. But honestly, I was being a little bit greedy. I knew that I had a whole bunch of metal that I needed to go through and smelt, and I didn't feel like chopping down trees. So you can guess it, yeah, I was so lazy that I actually went back to go through and basically kind of, tease these beavers, if you will. And I went through and I grabbed the wood that they had used to go through and make these beaver dams, except for that one little piece that I just couldn't move holding. And then I basically made my way back with all of the wood and basically everything that their home was I had just taken. And now we had 2 high-level Megatheriums. The only problem was that they were both female, but overall it was a pretty good day for taming. And I believe that brings us to the end of our journey for today. If you did enjoy today's video, then please consider leaving a like and subscribing if you're not already.